All right, everyone. So I want to talk to you guys about the COVID pandemic and the increase in military spending within global superpowers. There was an article that was published on this subject today by Eurasia Review, and I found it interesting. And so I want to read to you guys a couple of excerpts from this article. In one part of the article, it reads America, China, India, Britain, and Russia, which control 62% of world military spending in 2020, increased military spending significantly. America increased its military spending at the level of 4.4%, China 1.9%, Russia 2.55%, and Britain 2.9%. So these global superpowers, they began to significantly increase their military spending during the pandemic. And one thing that we have been witnessing during this COVID disaster is that countries are becoming more and more distant. These global superpowers understand this. Every nation understands this. And so it makes sense that countries will begin to focus more and more on their security during a pandemic because the global order, this order of globalization, is declining. And COVID has marked that decline. COVID has really been accelerating this decline. And so it makes sense that countries would begin to focus on really boosting up their national security, boosting up their military capacities. Pandemics make countries become more and more distant. And really that makes sense because when you have a virus that is devastating the world, it makes sense that countries aren't going to be side by side. They're going to be looking after their own interests. They're going to be looking to mitigate the whole disaster within their own borders before they start focusing on other countries. Just look at the controversy right now between Great Britain and France. Great Britain just stated that people in the EU citizens who have been vaccinated can travel to Great Britain unless they're French. That's what the UK has just decreed. If you're living in France, if you're French in France, you can't come to the UK. And the French government said, "Hey, this is discriminatory." And the British have said, "No, it's because there's this horrible variant, the Delta variant, and it's in France." And the French are saying, "Wait a second, the Delta variant only constitutes 5.5% or so of all COVID cases in France. What are you talking about?" And the British are saying, "No, that's all it has to do with blah 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 blah." And the French are saying, "No, we really see no reason for you to block us. This is obvious discrimination." Now, whether you agree with the French or the British is irrelevant. What matters is that what we are seeing are countries becoming more and more distant. Countries are no longer in this paradigm of globalization. Now, globalization still exists, but it has been greatly wounded, and the wound is deepening, and the dagger is the pandemic. Every millennial woman that you will meet will tell you how much they want to travel. I want to travel. That's all I want to do. I want to travel all over the world. Every girl that you will meet within my generation, I don't know how it is amongst Zoomers, but every girl that you will meet within my generation will tell you that they want to travel. That's all they want to do. And then you ask them, "Well, where have you traveled to?" Nowhere, because you ain't got no money. But they all want to travel. They want to go to France. They want to go to Greece. They want to go to Spain. They want to go to Italy. They want to go to Great Britain. They want to go eat fish and chips in a soccer stadium. But the bottom line is that these people are clueless. They truly are clueless. The era of just going out to travel is dying. It is dying. When my great-grandmother was a young lady, she traveled all over the place with her husband. My great-grandmother. She died when I was, I believe, a junior in high school. So I spent a lot of my life with her. She died in her 90s. and she lived through World War I, World War II. She lived through the influenza pandemic. She lived as an orphan for much of her life. But she traveled all over the place. She went to North Africa. She went to the Holy Land. She went um, uh, to Egypt. She went to the West Indies. She went to the Caribbean. She went all over Europe, and she loved to travel. And in that era, people traveled all over the place. They went from America, they went to the Mediterranean, etc., etc. They went all over the place. Traveling was something that people could do at ease. And this continued on. After the Second World War, people traveled all over the place. In the 70s, everybody was traveling. 60s, everybody was traveling. 50s, everybody was traveling. 80s, 90s, everybody was traveling. And up until really 2020, everybody was traveling. Hell, I went to Italy in 2019. I was in Italy from September 15th all the way into I want to say into the first week of October or the second week of October. And not too long later, COVID exploded in Italy. So up until 2020, traveling has been pretty leisurely, and people were just doing it at ease. Now that's not the case. Everybody's scared of getting infected. You go on an airplane, no one's on there. Everyone's wearing a mask on an airplane, and it's not the same anymore. So the global order, the status quo that we have been so accustomed to, is dying. It's dying. And countries are becoming more and more separate. Not only separate, but they're becoming more and more tense towards one another. And you see what's been happening with the South China Sea. All of these countries going against China because the Chinese have been laying claim to a little cluster of islands and some coral reefs in the South China Sea. And just recently, the Japanese came out and said, "Oh yeah, we agree, we condemn China, blah blah blah," even though Japan has no territorial claim in the South China Sea. It wants to condemn China. And the reason for that is because Japan has a claim to a number of islands called the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea. And the Chinese believe those islands belong to them. And so there's this whole territorial dispute. These territorial disputes, be it between the Japanese and the Chinese over some giant rocks, they call them islands, but they're really just giant rocks in the East China Sea, be it between the Russians and the Japanese over the Kuril Islands or the Sakhalin, be it between the Turks and the Greeks in Cyprus, be it between the Armenians and the Azeris and the Turks, for that matter, over Artsakh. These territorial disputes are going to deepen and deepen, and they're going to become more and more tense. I mean, hell, the Azeris and the Armenians just had a war over this, and many people died. I mean, even the British and the Spanish have had tensions over the Gibraltar. So these territorial disputes are going to get worse and worse. And there is a line from the article that was published by Eurasia Review that talks about this, and it says, quote, "However, there has been a fairly large concentration of conflict in several areas, such as the South China Sea, Syria, Yemen, involving many parties. This is a sign that in the next few years, there will be considerable changes in the global order of life, especially globalization." And that is absolutely true. I truly believe this. We have already been seeing this. I mean, this is not some crazy far-fetched claim. This is not like, oh yeah, pie in the sky stuff. We have already been witnessing this. It's very obvious. What the hell do you think Brexit was? Anti-globalization. The popularity for Trump was anti-globalization. The Yellow Vest movement in France was anti-globalist. The entire Eurosceptic movement is anti-globalization. Right now, what's been going on in France? I mean, what's been going on in France is crazy. They went just recently. A whole mob of French people went into a town hall in some town in France. They went into the town hall and they grabbed a giant portrait of Macron, and they were stepping on it as if they were Iranians in the U.S. embassy, stepping on the portrait and then throwing it out the window. And there's a huge crowd in front of the town hall clapping and cheering. This is 18th century level stuff here. We are literally living history. This is, I mean, it's kind of, it's scary. I'm not going to exaggerate this. It is scary. But at the same time, it is super fascinating to be alive at this moment. Super fascinating to be alive at this moment. We are literally living history, everyone. We are witnessing history. The stuff that you read in the history textbooks, the stuff that you read in Wikipedia, the stuff that you're reading in history books about what happened in the 18th century or what happened in the 1600s or the Middle Ages, we are living that. The stuff that your grandparents, or not really your grandparents, but the stuff that your great-grandparents told you about, the stuff that your great-grandparents told you about, and all the things that they told, all the things that they endured, and how they told you that your generation is a bunch of weaklings because you guys didn't endure a world war, you guys didn't endure a plague. You're now living it. You can tell your grandparents that hey, shut the hell up. I'm living it now, okay? The Great Depression, we're about to go through that. It's happening. It's happening. We are living history. All the stuff that your great grandparents told you that they had to endure through, and that and how you guys are softies because because you're not going through what they went through. Now you can say, nope, I'm going through it right now. The world is changing. I mean, it truly is changing. And you see what's happening in France and how all these people, they refuse to take the vaccine. Now, I'm not going to condemn these people for that. The French government is saying, if you don't take the vaccine, you could lose your job. If you don't take the vaccine, you don't get a little pass that allows you to go into public places like shopping centers, theaters, museums. You can't go into restaurants. Restaurant culture is a huge thing in France. And these people are up in arms. And they hate Macron. And in France, we have been seeing this pattern of just, I don't even want to call it anger. It's just pure rage against the government. We saw this with the Yellow Vest movement. Okay, 2018 came. Yellow Vesters. They all hated Macron. They were talking about beheading the man. They were talking about beheading Macron. They had these mock guillotines up. Hell, this type of thing happened in the United States. There was a whole mob in the Capitol building talking about how they want to hang Mike Pence. So we're not too far off from that either. And we had the Yellow Vest movement, and all the right wing all over the world was supporting this. And then COVID happened, so nobody could protest anymore. And then you had a series of beheadings last year. Some Chechen Muslim fanatic beheaded a teacher because he supposedly said something about Islam. And then you had, I believe, another beheading, which I'm pretty certain was also done by a Chechen or a Dagestani. Somebody from one of those Muslim North Caucasus areas. And the French people were outraged. You had these huge demonstrations. I remember, and this was during the whole COVID situation. And now we have this. So we've been seeing this pattern. It's getting more and more tense. And COVID is not going away. That's the thing. Look up, his last name is Osterholm. I forget his first name. I'm going to look it up real quick. But this guy is one of America's top epidemiologists. And Michael Osterholm, look him up. Michael Osterholm. This guy is one of America's top epidemiologists. And he said recently, COVID ain't going anywhere. We had a very low rate of infections in the United States, but now it's coming back with this COVID, this Delta variant. There is another variant that popped up in Florida recently, and we all know that the Floridians ain't going to do anything to curtail the spread of the virus because they want to go out and eat crawfish. So this whole thing's going to explode again. If you haven't done this already, stack up on toilet paper, soap, Lysol. Do it all right now when things are relatively calm, because this thing's going to explode. It's going to most likely explode again. And so when it explodes again, guess what's going to happen? Countries are going to become more and more distant. Supply chains are going to be impeded. Look at what happened with the price of lumber. It exploded. The price of lumber just soared. Now it's going down because things have become somewhat normal. So we have this huge influx of lumber. So we have to, they want to sell it as quickly as possible. So they're going to bring the prices down. But nonetheless, that was an example of how supply chains get greatly hindered. We saw this with the price of milk. We saw this with the price of meat. It's crazy what this virus can do. And so it's going to come back. Osterholm has already stated it's going to come back. It's not going anywhere. It's crazy. It really is crazy. But we are seeing the system of globalization just dying. That's what's happening. And it's not good. This is not good. We have benefited greatly from globalization. We have benefited greatly from the global order. America has benefited greatly. Just look at NAFTA. But we're seeing the environment, we're seeing the atmosphere that we have become so comfortable in just going down. And countries are going to become more and more nationalistic. France is seriously now talking about bringing back the draft. Why? Same reason why all these global superpowers have been increasing their military spending, because they know that war is coming. They know that war is coming. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.